Welcome to the Virtual Track Walk of Canada, one of my personal favorite tracks. This is a really fast, really fun track, and I will say that the ability to thread a needle, like right here, this track has several, they're not true like bus stop style chicanes, but I suppose they're chicane in the sense that they kind of break up what would have been a longer straightaway. There was me nearly blowing the hairpin. But the ability, like where we're coming up towards at the Wall of Champions, the ability to really thread a needle here is important. The ability to get all you can without exceeding the track limits is going to be very, very, very crucial here. As you can see here, just really abusing track limits on both of those curbs. Now this video was run on strict track limits. And so all you see is, what it will give you. And the limits basically are, as long as you keep 2 tires within the verge lines, you should be okay. Another spot where that thread the needle is very important is right here. Very, very important that you be able to use the track limits and just make a really good pointed straight line as much as you can through those chicanes. And that should help you be very, very fast here at Canada. So without any further ado, let's get down to the turn by turns.
Right, so let's get down to the turn-by-turn for Canada. So this is going into turn 1. You do want to be aware there is a little bend as you come around the start-finish line. You want to be track right as you go around that. So there's a few things to use. The main one I use is this pavement patch, I guess it is. Very, very clear and distinct line, and you use that a lot at Canada, these pavement patches. What's not such a bad idea to use either is because you might have to brake just before that, is to use this white patch over here, but that's actually harder to see when you're driving at full speed than you'd think. And this 100 marker, like, I honestly don't know as I ever saw that until I was actually making these little screenshot pictures. My marker is on the track, which is really where I like it, to be perfectly honest. So you'll turn briefly after you come off the patch, and what you really want to aim for is a spot so that your car is kind of parallel to the grass on this side of the track. This is about as perfect as I can make car placements. Notice that I really trail brake this corner. I'm just now easing off, and sometimes I miss this. Your aim is to get to it, but if you miss it, it's not necessarily a disaster. But I mean, this will save you a tenth or so. You're still within track limits too. You still got 2 tires within that verge line. And what you want to do is, as you come to the exit, you want to miss this. You want to be about a car width off of that curb. It's barely visible right about there. This is about as good as you can get it, honestly. It's really, really tricky. It's very easy to end up all the way on the right and really pinched off and have to go really, really slow around this next corner and have to have a lot of wheel cranked in it. What I find is if you drive just a little bit deeper than you may think you need to, like I start kind of a hard brake. There's also a little spot, by the way, if I back up, you can kind of goose the throttle a little bit through here, kind of a hustle zone. Right as you come out and you can get straight, you can just briefly hustle and then hard brake again. And if you get that hard brake, so that you start turning just as or maybe just after you pass this curb, depending on setup and how fast you're going anyway, then you'll be in a good spot. I don't feel like I'm doing a good job of describing this one, but I'll try to do better. Now, as you go around this, you have to hold that curb a long time as you go around here. Notice where the left hand is. The left hand is pretty much at about 1 to 2 o'clock territory. I mean, there is a lot of wheel going around this corner. If you look out on a track map, it is a much sharper turn than it initially seems. It's also a pretty slow turn. Notice 49 miles an hour. It's actually slower than the last turn by quite a bit. And what we're going to do is, as it starts to, as we can see the straightaway that we can't see right now, as we start to see that straightaway, we're going to start taking some wheel out and start adding some throttle back. This is really just a maintenance throttle corner until you can see straightaway and start straightening the wheel up. And it's a very easy corner to lose your patience in. So I wouldn't say it's necessarily crucial that you get out on that exit curbing. It's fine if you do. And that bridge might be something, depending on where you're looking in the game, as you see that bridge, that might be a good sign to straighten up and kind of go for the bridge as you're coming out of that last turn. But basically, if you can't see straight away, you still need to be turning back there earlier. Now, coming up, this is a really, really hard thing to see. There is a 100 marker in the wall. I believe there's actually a 150 marker in the wall as well. I start braking at about 75 to 80 or so. And what's really hard here, I'll have another slide in just a moment. It's not very far off of this, but you're going to brake and in a straight line more or less. Now the reason the wheel has a little bit of a right skew to it is because there was a marker back here. You see there's actually a little bit of a bend, and so you want to stay in the middle of the track and let the car kind of walk back out to the left as it goes around this bend, and this is where you end up. Now, as you come to the 50, remember you're braking at about 75 to 80. As you come to the 50, you start to see a curb on the right-hand side of the track. And this is a very challenging spot to get it right. It is very easy to abuse track limits, and it is very easy to miss. I mean, this is a spot that you will just work on your timing of this turn for a long time. For me, when I can start to see that curb, I know it's time to turn. And this is about perfect car placement. You notice there's still 2 tires within the verge line, and I was driving this with strict track limits, and I did not get called for this. You want 2 tires to touch this excess grading over here, whatever it is. It's not pavement exactly. You want 2 tires on that, and it's very hard to time that turn to get it there. It's very easy to miss this, but I would say it is very crucial that you actually put 2 tires at least on the red and white curb, preferably over the red and white curb, because what this is going to allow us to do is make a straighter line down this hill to thread this needle. Now, I would even say, if you notice on the last slide, you go back, I was not using a lot of gas, and I'm still not using a lot of gas. It's very easy to get too excited here. Basically, as long as you're patient and you wait until you can kind of at the bottom of the hill to start giving it a lot of throttle, then you're fine. But it's a very easy spot to run out of patience. And even if you put 2 tires into grass, you're fine here. This is very close. I may have even touched a little bit of grass. It looks like the tire's still more or less on the curb, but it was possible that right after this, like if you take it a moment later, that I was in the grass. That's fine as long as, remember, you have 2 tires on the track. And at least in the game, the grass doesn't seem to really hurt you right here if you brush it. I usually wouldn't give a shot going down what I would consider a straightaway, but this is a pretty significant bend in the straightaway. It is significant enough that if you are driving this track in the rain, you will want to lift as you go around it. Any other situation, even in a low downforce configuration, you should not need to really lift here. What is easy to do is end up on the wrong side of the track as you come out from around this bend. You want to be track right. You notice that the car is going to walk out a little bit, and I'm trying to hustle it back to the right half of the track as I come into my brake zone. As you come around that corner, there is a orange painted mark to show the beginning of a guardrail, and you want to brake just before that. And what you're going to be looking for is a pavement seam just ahead, much like what we saw in turn 1 that we're going to start our turning off of. That part's not too tricky. What is tricky is that there's a really wide thatch work over here that if you get too aggressive with this, it will call you out on track limits. But I would say this is much like the last downhill shot where Vettel went off a couple years ago, and there was a big penalty call over. But this is a really important shot to get to the left again, like the last sequence that was downhill, but this one's just not downhill. It's very, very important to get 2 tires on here and start setting up a really good thread to needle. At the very least, you want your tires touching the verge line or on the curbs. If you're out here somewhere because you overshot the corner, you just lost a lot of time. The next curb on the right is where you'll end up. You really want to stay track middle. If you don't really want to make it to this curb before it starts to go around the curve, you want to stay kind of track middle as you come out of this corner, and then cut it in to the right. Notice as well that I am not quite full throttle. I am actually going up the gears. Very shortly after this, I'll end up in 5th gear. It is the easiest spot on this track to break traction is coming off this corner. It tightens up a lot more than it looks like it would on this shot. And I would say due to the nature of the last corner, if you don't end up on the exit curbing, that might be okay depending on how you came out of the last turn. If you end up out there, great. If you're out there because the car went out there on its own, like you were on the gas so early that you had no choice but to go out there, then that's great too, as long as you're not breaking traction. This is a spot where I kind of talk out of both sides of my mouth. On one hand, you want to be back on the gas as early as possible, always. But on the other hand, doing that in this corner is a really good way to lose control of your car by being too aggressive. So we'll go down this straightaway. If we're on DRS, as you see here as well, I've got the battery on overtake mode going down this straightaway almost every lap. I start my braking just as I go under this bridge. As far as where I turn, it is very hard to describe, but it is a momentarily after coming out from under this bridge. But this bridge is a really good index mark for your braking. There was a 100 mark earlier as well. I don't really use it. What's very, very hard to see, and the arrow is not quite right, about right there is where the grass starts. But it is very, very hard to see most times of the day. And so this is just momentarily after we come out of the bridge. And as we come to, and this might be a good spot to use maybe in a practice session to just kind of time about where you want to be. But what you really want is a mental picture of about what this curb looks like and where you want to turn. This is about all the curb you want to use. If you use too much more curb than this, it's going to loop you around, and and if you don't loop around, it's probably going to call you on a track limits violation if you're on strict. But this is even with regular corner cutting stringency, this is about all you want to use. You're just touching the orange. If you get on that orange too much, remember it will spin you out. And you're looking to do a very similar thing on this next curb already. By the time you get here, you're already looking to put 2 left side tires just on the orange, or at least on the red and white on that next curb. And notice I am very, very gently back on the gas at this point. I'm adding more gas. I'm just touching the orange. I'm more or less on the red and white. And this is nearly perfect car placement. You will get called on track limits if you go over this, on strict especially. And right here is where you're going to, right about this point is about the most wheel you'll have in the car. You'll start straightening it up. There is an exit curbing ahead. And it is very, very usable. If you were on the gas early enough, you may find yourself going out here more or less to catch the car. But this is a really, really good rewarding section. These little chicanes are very rewarding when you hit them perfectly. And hitting those chicanes is perfect for this track, of course, as well. Now, again, here, notice there is a pavement seam. And this isn't really where you want to brake. If you're braking here, in most anything, except maybe if you're in a classic car, this is just not a good brake marker, honestly. You want to kind of use that timing and rhythm that I like to emphasize to go into this. So basically, just a car length or 2 into it, or maybe if I just count to 1 as I go over that pavement seam and then brake, that's about right. You might use this marker on the wall, but I don't. This might be a good marker to use for braking, but I use more of my timing as I go over this pavement. And also make sure you notice I'm still doing a little bit to straighten the car up, but I'm going to be straight down this verge line going into the hairpin. Now, this is a spot that, as much as I like to emphasize turning early in most spots compared to most real-life driving instructors, at least, that's an argument for another day, a hairpin is a spot where I never emphasize that hardly. You want to turn very late. And if what I use here is a couple of things. One is that curb is almost about to go out of my vision. Another thing I use is there's all these lines and marks that they put on where you would be going around this corner. And I just want to be kind of on the outside of that as I turn in. And I'm going to turn very, very sharp here. Notice I'm already left hand up in the air. I've already got a 90-degree turn. And I'm going to put more wheel than that in yet. And I'm going to very slowly bring that car back into this red and white curbing. If you're about halfway around the hairpin, which notice on the track, which it's kind of underneath the E, but we're a little over halfway around the corner at this point, and we have brought the car back to this red and white. The car's angle and trajectory is coming along nicely. And notice that this is just basically maintenance throttle, just kind of maintain speed around the corner. And once I see this straightaway, I'm going to open up the wheel. I'm going to start adding a lot of gas, and I'm taking it all the way out to this Rolex wall. That curb, by any reasonable imagination, if we were driving this thing in real life, I would think that curb is usable. But in this game, it will loop the car around. So you want to make sure you go around that curb. A very nice long straightaway ahead. I use this bridge to make sure I don't get lost. My brake markers, this is the hardest brake marker that I can use to find. And I'll admit, I've had a very hard time timing this by having like a mental picture of where to brake. And so I still use this little 100 marker on the side. And sometimes, like this is early in the race, lap 20. If you were later in the race, I would probably be just into that shadow or about 85 or so before I start my braking. And another thing is if you're using regular corner cutting stringency, you can drive deeper yet. You could probably drive to about 75 and then just abuse these next two corners more. And notice this is my braking point. Notice that I'm a left foot braker and I am coming off the gas as I mash the brake right here. This is pretty much my braking marker is the 100. This is strict corner cutting stringency, and honestly, I don't know how I got away with this because this tire is about to leave the track. But it gave me this, and it is very, very important that you take advantage of every bit of track limit that you can in these little threading the needle chicanes that we have in Canada. This is the Wall of Champions infamously here. Look up why it's called that. And what you're already doing at this point when you get here is you're looking to put your left sides on that orange, much like this. This is about perfect placement. And I call this perfect placement versus the last one because you notice my two right side tires are pretty comfortably a few centimeters to spare on that white line or inside that white line on the track. And there is a curbing that starts down here by the Aramco. And if you're driving this thing hard enough, you know, so we are maintaining and accelerating a little bit as we go through these two chicanes, then you will most likely end up out on those curbs. Now, if you cross the curbs, the thing about track limits over there is that if you cross the curbs and bash the wall, it'll also, not only did you just damage your wing and likely cut a tire, it just called you track limits violations as well. At least that's me driving on full simulation damage. So that's a lap. Now let's take a look at an uninterrupted lap of this track.
You're catching the car ahead by around 5/10 a lap. Well done, that's P1, P1. You're leading the race.